In Greenlights, Matthew McConaughey ends it in parts 7 and 8, all about change. Change is transformational, change is uncomfortable. And that's what McConaughey talks about, which is why we're going to talk about it here on the porch. We are Painted Porch Strategies. My name is Rob Hunter, and the MC here, the master of communication. Over there is Sierra Ram Cantrell, our chief joy officer, our mindfulness Sherpa. And this right here is the founder, the CEO, the chief evolution officer, Amy Yak. So, Sierra, I want to bring you in right from the get go because one of the things you deal with in your online program available on thepaintedporch.com is change within yourself and those barriers that you bump into. So, as you're reading about McConaughey's journey through change, as he wanted to become a different type of actor, not just the rom-com guy, the romantic comedy guy. He wanted to get into more dramatic acting. He had to do some evolving, some changing. So when you're reading that, helping people transform through change, what popped out to you?
Well, I think that you really have to kind of prepare yourself for change. And sometimes it's something that you decide, or sometimes it's a change that is thrust upon you. But when you're getting to decide, you have to get to a point where what you were doing before is no longer working. It's no longer manageable or joyful to proceed in what you're doing. So when you recognize that, and you're sort of like inviting the change. So when you know that what you were doing isn't going to work anymore, isn't going to fulfill you, and you know you need to make that change, that's your preparation. Or as an actor would say, that's your motivation. So when you have a motivation, a reason to get uncomfortable, it's like that little light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, okay, I wanted this. I don't want to go backwards. I want to go forward, go towards the light. And I think that that's something that helps you keep in mind when it's a change that you desire.
And that's part of it because oftentimes it's that feels we get into. And McConaughey talks about that a little bit because his transition from being the rom-com guy to being more of a dramatic actor took 2 years. He said no to a $14.5 million offer to be in a rom-com. Like, that's commitment to change. Like, that's a lot of money to say no to. And thankfully for McConaughey, he has money. So it wasn't the driving factor, but he still says, after the first offer, I said no. And they kept coming back with more offers to that 14.5 million. And he went back and looked at the script and is, but he still said no. So it's embracing that discomfort. That's how you get through it because your body's telling you something. And if you continue down the path that you were, you just suppress that, it will keep coming up. And that's why it's important, like you said, Sierra, to embrace that change. So let's shift over to business for a second, because this is something that you, Amy Yak, as our CEO, have really designed Painted Porch Strategies to help companies with. Because now you're talking about how difficult change is as one person, whether it's McConaughey, Sierra, Rob, Amy, whether it's you. And now you're taking a bunch of yous, putting them together on a team while trying to implement change, as everybody handles change differently. So as you're reading about McConaughey's journey through change, what popped up for you?
Well, the thing first and foremost is that change is a journey. It's not a destination. I think so often when businesses think about change, they do have an end goal in mind, that thing that whether we're going to restructure our organization, whether we're going to introduce a new product or tool in our toolbox, whatever it is, they view change as the thing as opposed to the activities and the events that go along with it. And I think with that, change is actually a 4-phase journey, if you will. There's a lot of steps along that journey. There's about 10 steps along that journey that at least we've identified on the Painted Porch, but it's a 4-part journey. And the first piece of it is planning, getting really clear on what it is you're doing and why. And not because you're necessarily trying to catch up. It has to be a really compelling reason. And that's what Matthew McConaughey also said. He didn't just say, yeah, I don't really want to do rom-coms anymore, so I'm just going to say no to them. He had a plan. He was very clear on his intention. He was very clear on his why. He had a very clear stated mission and goal that he wanted to achieve, and he took the time to think it through before he just went and told his wife or made this big decision and kicked it off. He spent the time to gain clarity on why he was doing it and planning what, not so much planning like all the different steps that you need to do, but planning how it's actually going to impact you, how it's going to impact, say for business, your organization. Plan for the unplanned, right?
Well, and I love that he even talks about one of the Stoic principles we talk about is premeditatio malorum, which is planning for the worst. And how he talks about this is he has this thought. One of the first things he says he does is he calls his financial guy to see how they are financially, to see. And I think he says, like, if I didn't make any money for a while, like how long would we be okay? So he's thinking now, he's thought about the practicality of what he wants, but now he has to think about, he's a householder, he has a partner, he has children that are depending on him. Now he's just, okay, let me make sure that this piece is done so that I don't have to stress that much about the money. Okay, we've got a place to live, we've got enough money. So within that framework, it's like it's setting that boundary. So Rob, what do you think?
I think change is necessary for any type of personal transformation or business transformation. It just is required. You got to figure out how to manage the discomfort and get through it, manage the change. But otherwise, you're stuck. And I've done a lot of personal transformation in my own life, tracing back to, my childhood, if we wanted to dig into all the crazy details. But it required a lot of examination. But that was time I gave myself that has been the best time I've ever spent. And that was what I think McConaughey is talking about, because McConaughey threw out Greenlights, and the point of a green light is to go. So he had, I would say, it relatively easy compared to most actors. Most people that want to be actors who move to Los Angeles have a much more difficult time breaking through. He broke through early, and he kept getting success after success after success. Doesn't mean he got every role he wanted, but his struggle was like a 1 year struggle or something like that. So he got to live this, I guess I'll just call it a life of access and excess. And he explains that in the book. But eventually that wasn't enough for him, and he knew it. So he decided he needed to settle down. That was a change for him, because Matthew McConaughey is good looking. He walks into a room, he's probably the centerpiece of most rooms. Most people want to talk to him. Women want to talk to him. Guys want to talk to him and be him. So he had all of these things going in his favor, but he knew he needed more. So you can imagine going through all of that, doing all of that, living that life of access and excess, and having to change, because you're pulling yourself away from the way you've lived for a long time. So he did it when he found his wife, and he did it again when he was changing career paths in the same business. So you're talking about two major transformations. And the way McConaughey talks about it is giving himself that time to change and learning how to manage the discomfort and figure out what the discomfort means. You can tell how much more fulfilled he is. You can tell that he looks at his life and he's like, man, I've been blessed. But part of that blessing is listening to that instinct that calls for change, that knows you're capable of more. And he went on to win his Oscar for the Dallas Buyers Club, which is something he always wanted to do, but was never going to do in a rom-com fashion. And it took 2 years of transition. I repeat that because that is daunting to so many people. But 2 years, hopefully, in the grand scheme of life, if it leads to fulfillment, no matter you're Matthew McConaughey or Amy or Sierra or you or me, that's time well spent. Like, that's my main takeaway from, what McConaughey is putting down as Greenlight comes to a close.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of throughout this book, he shares things that he's written over 35 or 40 year period, right? That he has always sort of turned to writing for himself in a journal or diary as a way of processing a lot of these thoughts, feelings, emotions, right? Is you need to process stuff. So when he's, especially in this 2 year period where he's like reinventing himself as an actor, is he processes a lot of these feelings and a lot of the things he's learning by writing things down. writing poems, writing stuff, just writing. He even talks about in the beginning of this book, he says, I wrote for a reason I didn't know at the time. I wrote just knowing that it might not be for anyone else to see but myself. But it's that processing, it's that pause. And whether you process by talking to a therapist or just having some alone time or by having a meditation practice, however you do it, doing art, I could go on for hours, but allow yourself that time to process it and feel it, because that's living.
Livin.
Well, and to touch on that, all of that processing, the method that McConaughey used was that poetry, were those moments, those walkabouts, right? As he likes to say, either in his mind or with his pen. It all reminds me of, Rob, what you talk about a lot, and one of your signature tools that you have in Master Your Message, which is writing a rap. He even says right here, a good plan is to first recognize the problem, stabilize the situation, organize the response, and then respond. And that's the essence of rap, recognizing what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you're experiencing in that moment, assess what it means, why it might be showing up, and then process what you're going to do next and decide how it is you actually do in fact want to respond. What would your best self do in this response? And then making that conscious choice before you do it, taking that time to reflect, to go inward, right? Sierra, as you talk about on radical mindfulness, take those moments of pause to listen, to reflect, and then respond.
It's communication with yourself is essentially the point of all of this, because your body communicates with you in two ways. That internal voice that tells you yes or no, or tells you you're an idiot sometimes, or maybe gives you some encouragement, hopefully sometimes. But there's also the emotional communication that your body sends you as a signal. You got to try to figure out what that is and why is it relevant? Why are you feeling it? And you can only do that with time.
Mm-hmm.
And, to use the painting as an example, the art, Sierra, that's Winston Churchill, who led England through World War II as the prime minister. This while the city of London was being bombed by the Nazis. He used to paint because that was where he'd go clear his mind, because he had heavy things to think about. He had heavy things he had to say, that he had to communicate. So he needed that space to be able to find a calm, to free his mind to do something else, so that when he was necessary to give the speech, he was ready. When it was necessary to make a decision, he was ready. So he wasn't completely burnt out and overwhelmed. Like, that's the big part of, I didn't accept that for the first 38 years of my life. I'm like, no, you just power through it. Who has time for that? And I'm like, no. Now I schedule some me time, mostly on the weekends, where I'm like, no, Robbie needs to work on change, and part of that is working on how my body is communicating with me and how my mind is communicating with me. Similar to what McConaughey really talks about in that writing a rap, like Amy was talking about, my signature tool is about that space. Like, I worked on one issue. Amy was out of town. I worked on it Thursday night while you were out of town, all day Saturday, and half of the day Sunday before I had like a revelation. I was like, oh, because I gave myself that space and I knew I needed that space to be able to really dig in. And every time you do that, you find another little piece of happiness. You find another little piece of fulfillment. You find another piece of self-understanding, which is, to me, Amy and Sierra, the point of Greenlights and the point of Matthew McConaughey writing it. And I like that it's not just a typical memoir, right? Like, I did this, I did this, I did this. It's much different than what you'd expect out of an autobiography.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I love in part the whole theme of part 7 is be brave, take the hill. And when we think about the idea of change, so often we can get comfortable in where we are, in who we are, and how people see us today. And so the idea of change is either something that is not of interest to us or of necessity. I can see that in business a lot. We're doing so well. Why, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, it's through that constant challenging, that constant exploration of what can we do different? What could we do better? What could we think about in a different way? that's how you're going to actually continue to grow. But the biggest piece is know what your hill is. And that's what he talks about here. He's like, take the hill, but be very clear and recognize what your hill is. You know, he talks about people who want to be successful. I want to be successful, or I want to feel appreciated, or I want to feel seen. If you've never taken the time to actually define that, all you're doing is grabbing at I wishes and vapors. You have to get really clear on what your hill is. What is success to you? What does it look like? What does it not look like? Or what does appreciation, what does recognition, what does it look like to you? Because else you're going to be on a 75-year journey and never actually get to your hill because you've never actually spotted or drawn out what that hill looks like that you need to climb.
Well, and I think it's important to, like you just saying about the success piece, is the definer of success is going to be different from each person. And I love how in his journey, remember earlier in the book, he kept talking about how he was starting to lose his hair.
Mm-hmm.
And how he was really self-conscious about losing his hair, and that's probably why he shaved his head and all that. So here in that stage of his acting career, he was thinking about what he looked like. That it's that ego or that external. And newsflash, in Hollywood, it is a lot about what you look like. So he wasn't off base there. But he was very kind of nervous about that outward appearance and what that meant for his roles. But as he grew, by the end of the book, he had redefined what he wanted out of roles to be less about what he looked like and more about what made him feel sparky, what made him feel alive and challenged. So to him, it was no longer about my goal is to look handsome or like I've got a head full of hair or no wrinkles in my movie. My goal has shifted to success. To me, is feeling great about what I'm doing. And that is part of a bigger awakening of moving out of that ego or of that shell self and into that inner layer of your true spirit, your true essence of who you are. That is like, I mean, ultimate enlightenment, as Buddhists would call it, right?
Well, and I love the fact that he does throw it at the end. He's like, and by the way, my hair's never looked better. So yes. by letting go of that situation, or by reframing that red light or that yellow light into a green light, which is the big theme of this, by taking that and reframing it, it's like you release the tension almost on those follicles, and they were like, oh, okay, we're free to grow again. We're not being constricted by your ego or your expectations.
But you can only do that by being honest with yourself, right? Exactly like McConaughey was. I never knew that he was losing his hair. Mm-hmm. I doubt anybody did. Yeah. Which for him as an actor at however old he was, 30 at the time, like you said, Sierra. Mm-hmm. And Sierra has an acting background, so she knows it better than us. That's a big deal. Like no one's going to hire a bald dude to be the lead in a romantic comedy. And he knew that because that was his career, his bread and butter. Right or wrong, it's just the way that it is. So there's a lot of pressure to look like Matthew McConaughey, mm-hmm. if you're Matthew McConaughey. So by being honest with himself and what that meant to him and how ultimately there's more to life than that, he was able to make that change. And going back to that, the part 7 and 8, with that theme of change, it is a journey of honesty about himself. Like there are certain parts in there I'm like, yeah, he didn't need to say that. But he did because he wanted to be honest, you know? Mm-hmm. And that vulnerability is how, that self-vulnerability is how you arrive on your hill. Mm-hmm. And how you charge your hill or take the hill, as McConaughey says. Mm-hmm. So I think that looking at the themes throughout the book as it wraps up, it is a journey of change from birth to 50 years old, I think, when McConaughey published this book.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to touch on one other thing that I think is so important when we think about change in our lives or changes in our business, is that he says, interestingly enough, it took 2 years. And there was a period of time where he was like, I think they've forgotten about me, because he was getting offers at the beginning and then he turned them down and then it was crickets. And he's like, I didn't get a single offer. And then around the 2-year mark, they started coming in and they started being more aligned with who I was. And the reason why, he's like, because they in essence forgot about me, it allowed them to think about me differently than how I had been defined before. And I think that's so true with anything that you're doing with change, because we're worried, what will people say? What will people think of me? Will anyone see me? Will anyone listen? If we do this, we're going to lose customers. But you may gain new ones, better ones. You may gain greater opportunity because you stepped away to redefine you, but also you have removed yourself from that box, that other people, that expectation that, this is the way they do it. You've removed yourself from that, which opens up so many more potential opportunities. And that's exactly what he said. By stepping away, the space allowed people to see and think about me differently. And I think that's so key when you're trying to get relative, get real, get authentic with who you want to be, is being brave enough and courageous enough to be able to say, you know what they think of me is not the real me. I want to be the real me, or I want to do something differently. And it'll allow people, they might fight it. You might have a 2-year gap here where people don't see you, or like, what is she doing? What are they doing? Why? What? No, I can attest to that personally. But through that, you can completely redefine and reshape who you want to be or how you want to serve in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's that hill.
The reconnaissance.
Yes. Which is a clever bit of marketing that he admits he created and attributed to a journalist.
I love it. That's a very Trump move of him.
But I think we all go through life and we get to a certain point. I mean, this is what a midlife crisis essentially is that, you get to a point where you might think you've lived half your life. Like, I'm 44 years old. I'm like, okay, I'm about, hopefully not quite at the halfway point, but I'm getting pretty close to it. And when you talk about being 88 or 92, there are several of 88 and 92-year-olds who still do all kinds of things, but that's very uncommon. The way that I think that they probably still are able to do it is because they allow themselves to change and adapt and grow. Because that is what I found to be where the fulfillment comes in, is going, okay, so I've done pretty well in life, done most of the things I wanted to do. Now what? It's just growth. So call it a midlife crisis. It doesn't mean I'm going to go buy a Corvette and ride around with the top down, but I'm embracing this idea that there could be more available to me with whatever doors that I'm able to open. And it probably will take 2 years to get a result from that. But it's worth the time, space, and effort to do. It's like Michael Jackson said in Man in the Mirror, make the change. Make that change because it's good for you. So in closing, Greenlights, do we recommend it to people to read?
100%.
Yeah, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It was different than what I was thinking, an autobiography would be. I love the way he weaved in about his writing. I love the way he weaved in about his youth and things that he learned, some things through trial and error, things about his acting career. I found it very interesting. So whether you're an actor or not, or interested in him as a movie career or not, I found it very interesting. I found it aligned with a lot of our Stoic principles and values. And I would give it 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, I agree. I would say if you're looking to read this of how to succeed in Hollywood, it's not the book. It's not going to be that book for you. That is not this kind of book. This is a book about getting relative with yourself and how Matthew did it throughout his 30 years of journaling journey and what he's learned along the way. And while some of his experiences are very unique to him, the overall lessons that he took away from those experiences, I would say, are universal for all of us. And if you want to read something that gives you a little bit of courage or permission to do something different, to maybe, dance to the beat of your own bongo, if you will.
Make it or not.
Make it or not. I would say this is a book that you should absolutely support. Plus, it's really fun the way he wrote it. There's a lot of his poetry. It's presented in different ways. There's a lot of pictures. He has fun bumper stickers that he calls them. So it's not just all text. It's a fun little adventure, I think, a little journey that you're going along with him on. And through that, I would hope that you would be able to find those, what he refers to as red and yellow lights, and how you can, over time and reflection and space, see how those can become green lights because of the lessons that you learn, which is a very Stoic principle in and of itself, right? The obstacle is the way. We need that friction. We need those moments of challenge in order for us to get clarity, to have appreciation, and I think to find fulfillment in our life.
And to get stronger, just like you would in the gym, right? You lift weights because it's resistance. This is life's resistance. And the more you practice with it, the more you meet those obstacles, the stronger you get, the more flexible you become, really, which Sarah knows as our yoga instructor here, right? It's all about how the body moves, but in addition, how you move through obstacles and how you say, oh, I learned something from this obstacle, so now I'm ready for the next obstacle, because that's what it is. It's a culmination of lessons through life that McConaughey is able to put down, that we all have, that we all can relate to, that we all have a commonality with. And it is about making those changes. So make that change with us. We are Painted Porch Strategy. If you have questions, comment right here. If you have thoughts on Greenlights, we absolutely would love to welcome you on the porch. Let us know what you think about it. And remember, make that change.
I do have one other thing I want to say, actually. I want to add two final notes here. I think this is a beautiful quote that I think any of us can take away from this book, but also in life, that life is our resume. It's our story to tell, and the choices we make write the chapters. And I think that's a great just little nugget of wisdom to take away from as you go about your day and your life and the novel of your life that you're writing, whether literally or figuratively, and being very conscious of the chapters and whether or not it's a book that you would want to read. And then the only other thing is, I just love, I don't know if you read these, but I always do. I like it because it has a little bit of insight, is the about the author at the end. I don't know, did you read those? I would encourage you to read it. I would encourage you to read it. I always like to read the about the authors because it's the one opportunity where the person who is writing the book is presenting themselves and in summary. And he just put some beautiful little pieces in the about the author, a little bit of humor, not taking himself too seriously, that I think just is a perfect encapsulation of who Matthew McConaughey is. So I would encourage you, both for this book and others, read the about the author, read the acknowledgments, see who they thank, see what they say in their thanks, and then read the about, because it sometimes can give you a really great summary and overview of who this person really is or who they believe they are.
And on that note, if you want about the authors on us, head over to onthepaintedporch.com. For Amy, for Sierra, I'm Rob. Thanks for being here with us.